We're holding now the closing part of the Shemona Esrei of the Amidah. It's Modim. Modim Anachloch. We give thanks to you. I mentioned that one of the offerings that was brought in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, was a thanks offering. When does one bring a thanks offering? So the Talmud tells us if one experiences one of four things. If one recovers from a serious illness, one must bring a thanks offering. A thanks offering is comprised of an animal, which the person himself, although he's not a Kohen, is permitted to eat, and it's eaten in Yerushalayim, in Jerusalem, and the 40 loaves of bread, which accompany the thanks offering. 30 of the 40 loaves are matzah, not leavened. 10 are leavened, what we call chametz. And when you recover from that serious illness, you bring the thanks offering to offer thanks to God that you recovered. A person was incarcerated in prison, and he was released from prison. That he was released and he came out of that alive, or not compromised physically, mentally, emotionally, you give thanks to God, you bring a thanks offering. If one travels the high seas, where you're in a state of danger, and you return in safety, you bring a thanks offering to God to thank him that you're alive. The fourth situation where you bring a thanks offering is if a person travels, takes a trek through a desert, we're exposed to unlimited amounts of danger, and you come out alive, you bring a thanks offering. These are the four instances you bring a thanks offering. And there are others. A person, God forbid, is in an accident and comes out alive, you bring a thanks offering, something similar to this. But this is the format of the situation where you bring a thanks offering. Means something out of the ordinary happens that naturally you shouldn't have survived, and it's semi-miraculous you did survive. You acknowledge God by saying thank you. And it's brought through, the acknowledgement comes through the thanks offering. So there's a question which is asked by the commentators. Normally, all meal offerings are matzah, not leavened. They're not chametz. Why are 10 of the 40 loaves, why are they chametz? Why are they chametz? Chametz always represents, as we discussed it, on Pesach, something that's leavened rises. It represents something negative. Pompousness, haughtiness, self-centeredness. That's something that's leavened is tastier. Of course, there's the fermentation process causes it to be tasted. It represents desire. So Pesach, we eat matzah. God says, I want you to wean yourself and separate yourself from arrogance and desire for 7 days. And that will be beneficial to your spirituality, to put you on an even keel for the whole year. The evil inclination, who's the one who tempts us and challenges in all aspects of our lives, is compared to the yeast in the dough, because that activates all these various things within us to cause us, to challenge us, and even to fail. So the question is, so if the thanks offering is a meal offering, and as the 30 loaves are matzah, why do we have 10 loaves which are chametz? That's the question which is asked by the commentators. So one of the commentators explains, the Sefarno, that if a person is in the position of danger, if he's sin-free, he's sinless, and he has no claim against him, spiritually speaking, why should he die? There's no reason for him to die. He has a clean record. The only reason why it's considered a miracle that you didn't die and you weren't subject to the environment, whether it's the ocean or it's the desert, is because there is a claim and you deserve to be punished, but God is willing to protect you despite your shortcomings. Spiritually speaking, He protects you. That's why you say thank you. A person has unlimited amount of debt, and the creditor says, you know something? I'm going to give you a 4-year grace period before you pay. Here the person believed that the mountain was coming to crush him, and he says, 4-year grace period. The person has a sigh of relief. He says, thank you. And he'll sing the man's praises for the next 4 years till he comes knock on his door again. You're relieved. So since nobody has a perfect record, as King Solomon says in Koheles, even the greatest tzaddik doesn't have a perfect record. So there is a basis for prosecution, and you should have been compromised. So despite that you should have and you weren't, that's why we bring the thanks offering. That's the representation of chometz, that even though there is chometz here, it's not a perfect situation. You're lacking in purity. Despite that, God performed the miracle and you recovered. You came out of prison whole. You survived the ocean, the sea voyage. You survived the desert. That's how the Sephardim explains it, which is very understandable. I explained it a little differently. Now, I always say, rule of thumb, a person who's appreciative and he feels beholding to somebody who did something on his behalf, what does that normally indicate? That's usually a quality person. That's an indication of quality. But there are very few people, or the vast majority of people, do they fully reciprocate to the degree that they were accommodated. They don't. They minimize the degree that they were beneficiaries. The question is why? If actually you're a beneficiary to that degree, acknowledge it. But somehow, as we say in the vernacular, everybody has a spin on it. I'll give you an example. Person works for a company and they give him a bonus. Gets a sizable bonus. You have two types of people. One person says, you can't imagine that I feel privileged working for this company. They treat their employees exceptionally well. Not only did they pay my salary, they gave me a handsome bonus. It makes a difference in my life. Therefore, I'm beholden, I'm even more dedicated to the company. Another person says, what do you think they gave me a bonus? If I wouldn't provide profits for them and I wouldn't be their rainmaker, would they give me a bonus? I feel they should even give me more. Rather than being beholden and being thankful and appreciative, the man says, I owe them nothing. It's a debt they paid me. But qualitatively, what's the difference between these two people? The one who sees it, even though it's true, you only give a bonus to a person who actually has added value, but factually, you are a beneficiary because they're not forced to give you the bonus. They could give you a lesser bonus. So to be appreciative, that speaks volumes of the quality of that person. The other person who has his spin on it, who sees it, puts it in his own context, he doesn't want to recognize that he is a beneficiary. So therefore, he interprets it and processes it that he has no debt of gratitude to the person who provided that for him. But why? But if actually speaking, you are a recipient and a beneficiary of somebody else's good value, why not? So King Solomon in Mishle in Proverbs tells us, Eved lo v'lish malveh. When you borrow money, you're a slave to your creditor. The debtor has a slave responsibility. You have to pay that debt no matter what. If the man was nice enough to lend you money, you're at his beck and call. Not that you have to say thank you, but if there's a question, you owe the money, you say to the creditor, you come pick up your own money. You want the money, come pick it up yourself. I'm too busy now. No. You as a borrower have an obligation to repay the person, to go to the lender, because that's part of, you're indebted. There's an indebtedness between the debtor and the creditor. You understand? When you assume debt, you're shackled, you're bound, you're burdened. Which human being wants to be burdened? Adam, he's given one mitzvah. Don't eat of the tree of knowledge. And nobody could have understood it better than Adam. He's the God of Eden. And what does he do? He eats of the tree of knowledge, which God said, not in the day you will eat, you will die. You become subject to death. Of course, he had to somehow justify it. How did he justify eating? God says, no, how did he justify it? So I always say over the name of the Arizal that we read in Pirkei Avos, Lefum Tzara Agra, that the greater the challenge, the greater is the value of the accomplishment. Before eating the tree of knowledge, to do the right thing was what we call a shoo-in. The clarity he had was so simple, it didn't take that much effort to do the right thing. He wanted to be the hero. I will eat of the tree of knowledge, become convoluted. I will no longer have that clarity, and despite the lack of clarity, I will still do the right thing. But why? You know why? Because I want to have my input. I don't want to live my life based on what you tell me. I want to have my own creativity to develop my own approach. You understand? I don't want to be bound by your dictate. I want to have some ingenuity, creativity in the way I live my life, even as a servant of God. So God comes to Adam and says, what happened? He says, I want to be a hero. God says, I'm not looking for heroes. I'm looking for a person who does exactly what I told you to do. That's the servant of God. That's what I want. A human being naturally, we find that when Adam comes to, God comes to Adam and says, why did you achieve knowledge? What did he say? He said, it's the woman you gave me. Hear this? The woman you gave me. Why did God create a wife, Adam? To be his helpmate, to assist him in his objective. So God says, here I give you a woman who has invaluable value to assist you to succeed. And then you point the accusing finger at me that I'm the cause of your failing. You're an ingrate. You're an ingrate, because if you'd appreciate what it was, you couldn't speak this way. Could you imagine? Not only that Adam wasn't he feel indebted to God for giving him the wife, he accuses God of he's the cause of his failing. Could you imagine? To that degree, that's what a human being is. He runs to such a degree and denies that he's a beneficiary that not only does he acknowledge the creditor or the benefactor for the good, the problem which comes about, he blames it for the problem. You're the cause of the problem. When we were in the desert in the 40th year, and the generation of desert passed on during that 40-year period, the 40th year, we're about to go into the promised land, the Jews start complaining. We've been eating this wafer food long enough, 40 years. You know something? We haven't done our bodily functions in 40 years because it was miracle food. It was absorbed in the inner organs. You know something? We never thought about it. Maybe eventually, you know what's going to happen? All this that we ingested over this 40-year period will expand in our intestines, and our intestines will burst and we're going to die. You hear this newfangled bug that got into their heads. God immediately sends vipers, and they start biting the Jews, and they start dying. God says, Kri Tova b'nei Kri Tova. You're ingrates who descend from an ingrate. Your forefather Adam is an ingrate. This is a continuation of that same being an ingrate. How do you see something so backward? How do you see something so wrong? You know what this is? Not only are you not appreciative and feel indebted for the miracle that I do for you, but you have a claim against me. You're coming up with newfangled understandings that this is all a ploy to destroy us. You understand what this is? Because nobody wants to be a debtor. So now let's talk about the thanks offering. A person recovers from an illness. He had the best medical care, best doctors. and he recovers. He has to bring a thanks offering. Now he has a choice of how to really see this, what happened. Does he attribute it to the medical field, to the miracle drug and the doctor, or does he attribute it to God? Because, not everybody lives with the doctor, with the medicine, with the modern medicine. Do you attribute it to the doctor and to your insurance that you were able to afford to pay that for that kind of medical care? Or do you attribute it to God? Because you didn't have to live. Now, if you attribute it to the doctor and not to God, you're not indebted to God. You're not a debtor. So there's a struggle. Naturally, human being doesn't want to be a debtor. Acknowledging that I have a benefactor, I'm a debtor. That means I'm beholden to God. So it's a struggle. There's a statistic, people recover. But not everyone recovers. Well, based on the statistic, I should have recovered. You still have to bring that thanks offering. Of course, despite the fact is that you could have attributed to statistic and say it has nothing to do with God, yet you saw it correctly, and you're saying, thank you, I'm acknowledging I'm alive because God wanted me to be alive. So what is thank you? Thank you is an acknowledgement that you are my benefactor. That's what he's saying, thank you. That means despite the challenge, which is a difficult challenge, that to assume a debt of responsibility to your benefactor, I'm happy to assume that debt of responsibility. I am a debtor to God. Therefore, what is that? That's chametz. I had a struggle. The chametz, the evil inclination, me said, turn your back on God and attribute to statistic. Despite that I have an evil inclination, I saw it right. That's the thanks offering. Even though a human being part and parcel of his makeup is evil inclination, despite that, he overcame that challenge and he saw it correctly, despite the chametz, despite the evil inclination. Therefore, as a result of that, 10 of the 40 loaves are leavened to indicate that despite that, nevertheless, he sees it correctly. That's the modim. That's the thanks offering. And every one of these instances, whether it's leaving prison intact, well, there are people who do leave intact. People do this. People recover. People travel the high seas and come back alive. They take the trek through the desert, they come back alive. You could say it's a statistic, or no, God wants you to be alive. I acknowledge God wants me to be alive. That's the accomplishment. That's the success. That's the success story. That's what it's about. We're healthy. We succeed. We have blessing. We're intelligent. We're able to process things. We're endowed with a degree of insight and wisdom. Well, you say, I'm no different than the guy down the block. Some are smarter, some are less smart, some are more successful, less successful. That's the reality of the world. No. I give thanks to you. So what is saying thank you? Thank you is an acknowledgement. This is not something which is random. It's not a random occurrence. But rather, the reason why I am a beneficiary of what it may be is because God chose that I should be the beneficiary. Therefore, we say thank you. So the closing section of the Amidah is what? It's something very vital. Very often, I once told a story with my friend that professed atheist. And I asked him, I said to him, if you'd be on the battlefield and there's a trench and you go into the trench and the mortar is falling, exploding, and you'd be in the trench and I'd offer you a book of Psalms. I said to him a book of Tehillim. You knew what Tehillim was. Would you say the Tehillim? Because we say, there are no atheists in the foxhole. Would you say the Tehillim? He says, of course I'd say the Tehillim. I said, if you came out alive, unscathed, would you attribute that you survived because of the Tillim? He says, no. So I said, so why did you say the Tillim? He says, because what do I have to lose? That's it. That's what he said to me. You understand what this is? He cannot acknowledge. The man is so pompous, even though he's a giving person, but he gives the way he wants to give. Everything is his spin, his brand. It's his kindness. It's the way he structures it. It's according to what he wants. If you attribute your survival to God, you realize, Mr. Big Shot, it's not you. I could deflate you in 3 seconds. And you're not deflated because I didn't deflate you. You know something? That's too much for him to swallow. Although this guy, he could eat a triple portion of food, and he could eat another triple after that. He has a great capacity, but he's swallowing what he wants to swallow. But to swallow what somebody else wants him to swallow, he's not swallowing that so quickly. That's part of his self-centeredness. It's the way I see it. So not to say thank you to God, not to acknowledge that this is God's doing, that's a denial. That's an arrogance. It's a lack of humility. Because if you are a debtor, so acknowledge you're a debtor. No, I'm a self-made man. I went through plenty in my life. And despite that, I came out on top. You know, this person, he always uses a word. And I never heard the word until I met him. He needs empirical evidence. Unless he has empirical evidence, he doesn't accept it. So what happened was, I said to him, when there was the market crash in the 80s, and he lost in one day about $300 million, and you couldn't even get him on the phone. That's how he was in the doldrums. So I called him up. I said, I thought you buy and trade and sell. It's all based on empirical evidence. So what happened? It's all empirical evidence. He says, well, you realize the peaks and the valleys. This is one of the valleys. That's what he said to me. You know, you understand? Your head is, you're about to go under the quicksand. You're about 2 inches before it goes into your mouth. And you can't acknowledge it. And so, but you understand? God brings merit to the meritorious. So what happened? Everybody sold off what they had for nothing. And because he had more money than most, he picked up everything for nothing. So he came out more ahead because of the crash than prior to the crash. That proves I'm head honcho. I'm top of the hilt. I'm King Tut. You know, they'll display your remains in the Museum of Natural History and they'll send it around the world, King Tut. But no modim. I don't say thank you. I say only thank you for what I'm interested in. Otherwise, no thank you. I once took this person to Rabbi Pinto. And this person is no lightweight, physically speaking. So Rabbi Pinto said to him, you don't wear tefillin, do you? He says, no. But of course, he was given tefillin at his bar mitzvah. And he says, I promise you that if you wear tefillin, the story goes back about 20 years ago. I promise you, you will never experience a stroke in your life. And this person, based on his physical profile, he could be, God forbid, a candidate for a stroke. Overweight, doesn't eat healthy, doesn't exercise as you should, a candidate. I promise you, you wear tefillin, you will never have a stroke. You know what he said to Rabbi Pinto? No, thank you. I appreciate what you're saying. I will not put on tefillin. That was the story. Because it's his way, no other way. I only say thank you for what I'm interested in. Otherwise, it's no thank you. And that's what it's all about. Modim anachnu loch. We give thanks to you. Now, if you don't read a little bit further, most people don't even think about this. It doesn't resonate. What's the first and foremost we give thank you for? For what all our supplications? Now, what was the opening phrase, blessing of the Amidah? Elokeinu ve'elokei avosenu. What is Elokeinu? When we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, what's Elokeinu? God Almighty. You know what Almighty means? That means all power is contained within him. That's Almighty. He created this universe. He's Elokeinu. Could you imagine? We, physical beings, fickle peons, nobodies. He took us to be his people. And there's a personalization. What is the value of that? You know what the value of that is? It's not to be understood, to be privileged. If you said thank you for the next 1,000 years, it's not enough. If you really appreciate and understand what that means. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Elokei Avoseinu. You're our Almighty and you're our forefathers Almighty. So what's first and foremost that we have to thank you for? Not that he puts food on our table. Not that he gives our health and our intelligence and our blessing. That you are our God. You being the Almighty, you took us as your people. There's a personalization between us and you. Literally those words. The same words we began the Amidah with. We identified who is God to us. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu. Modim nachloch shatu Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu. The same words. And the God of our forefathers. But here we had something else. La'olam vo'ed. This relationship is forever. Never to be terminated. To that degree, God accepted us to be his people, to be our God Almighty, and to be concerned for us that there's this personalization between us and him. That's what we're giving thanks for. We're appreciating that. The nations of the world, when they were off the Torah Sinai, they said, no, thank you. We have other priorities. We're too busy right now. First and foremost, what do we give thank you for? Shatohu Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoseinu. That's the first thing. L'olam vo'ed, forever. So there's no escape clause here. Once we're in forever. And for that, we see the upside. There's nothing comparable to this. Even angels don't have that level of relationships. The greatest angels don't have that relationship with God. So by saying Modim, we acknowledge that, we value that. We're indebted, we're beholding to you for that. That's the connotation of Modim. Modim and Achulach.